Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Bandish, founder of The Curious Mindset. The Curious Mindset is a private, invitation only community for technology leadership teams powered by 64 Tech, a technology provider across hardware, cloud, and IT services. While 64 Tech powers the platform, the real value of this community comes from the people in this room. As responsibility grows, technology leaders are expected to move faster, decide with less information, and carry more weight, often without the space to think things through properly. Many leaders end up stuck in reactive mode, firefighting, buried in strategy decks, and chasing delivery. And somewhere in all of that noise, the space to think clearly quietly disappears. That is why we built the Curious Mindset, a space for technology leaders to step out of that noise and have honest conversations with people who understand the pressures of the role. There are no membership fees, no intrusive sales methods, just human connection and valuable perspectives from experience. Our belief is simple: technology leaders lead better when they are not figuring it out alone. And that belief sits at the heart of 64 Tech's mantra: together we grow. Now it's my pleasure to hand you over to our host, Andy McMenemy, our resident technology leader co-host, Steve Maxwell, and our very special guest, Cate Huston. Thank you for being here.
Bandish, thank you. And thank you so much for your continued support through 64 Tech. None of us would be here today without your generosity and without you having the vision for creating the Curious Mindset, where we can all come together in sessions like this and learn from fantastic leaders in the industry and other guest speakers that have a lot of value to offer us. Today, I'm delighted to introduce in a moment to the Curious Mindset, Cate Huston. Cate has held significant roles as engineering leaders at Google and DuckDuckGo. She's also a TEDx speaker, which is quite an accolade to have. And she's also, I just found out on chat, a professional raccoon handler.
I don't have a raccoon, unfortunately. I'd totally forgotten about the TEDx thing. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And so today, Cate is going to be taking us through a number of subjects that will help us to focus on self-leadership, self-management, and managing that process at scale. We're going to be looking at energy management, which is critical for us. We're going to be looking at defining and evolving the role, and we're going to be looking at expanding the leadership range. It's my great pleasure to introduce you, Cate, to the Curious Mindset. Well,
Oh, hi. Hello, Curious Mindset.
it's lovely to see you here on Friday, and I'm really curious to hear your take on all of these subjects, because self-management and evolving our brand, evolving and growing as leaders is critical to all of us. We all want that feeling that we've got more potential inside of us we can yet unlock. So Cate, take us into the first one then. What would you like to talk to us about, and what should we be aware about energy management as a process?
Yeah, so energy management and time management, in my mind, completely distinct. And often what gets us into a leadership position is we have really good time management, we're getting a lot done. And then, my observation is a lot of people new to leadership roles in particular, but also sometimes people who they've been in it for a long time, but it's just changed on them, is that they get really exhausted and depleted. And the answer isn't fixing their time management, because that's normally pretty good. The answer is fixing their energy management so they can actually prioritize and get done the most important things. So when we talk about energy management, Andy, tell me, what do you add to your to-do list on Monday and you wait until Friday to do?
Oh my goodness, there's quite a few things in mind, I'm afraid.
And your boss is here, I'm sorry. But yeah, tell me, just give me one example.
So one of the main things for me is I do become overwhelmed by tech because I'm not a tech leader. So
Yeah.
I set out on Monday with the best of intentions of getting lots of things done, and then find myself dropping off very rapidly when I become overwhelmed. And that's, I guess, my energy focus shifts.
Yeah, but also what makes you overwhelmed? What can unoverwhelm you?
Yeah, I guess it's just complexity, and not having the right person to ask at the right time, because everyone's busy, right? So getting those things into a place where I can talk to
Oh,
people is for me frustrating.
I see. Interesting. Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is you don't really want to bother people. And so then you put things off and they weigh on you more than they need to.
Absolutely. And I
Okay.
have made a concerted effort to change that. So I've recognized that drops my energy, and then I
Yeah.
become frustrated.
Yeah. But then, I mean, this is a great example because it's something you're aware of and that you've actually improved. So what has it helped you with your energy? Like, are you leaving less things till Friday as a result of this shift?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm reaching out a lot more to people that have those technical competencies, and I'm
Yeah.
not, but I'm planning further ahead. So I'm asking if it's feasible to have a conversation in the next 2 or 3 days, as opposed to trying to get something sorted now. I'm telling you to start on Friday, so I'm projecting a little bit further.
I love it. That's great. So this is exactly what I mean about energy management is you notice the thing that's really draining you and you develop a strategy to make it less draining to you. Also think about the difference between emotional work and work, right? Like often, I'm sure all of you have gone out for dinner with your friends and spent too much time complaining about your job, right? And you feel like that's work, but it's not. It's just emotional work. And at the end of it, you feel like you spent an evening at work instead of with your friends. And so I think part of energy management is like figuring out what is disproportionately draining and how do we manage it better? Because it doesn't get less draining if we leave it on our list till the end of the week or it becomes an emergency. And two, thinking about what we're giving energy to and what we actually want to give energy to and trying to be cognizant of how we apportion it.
That's great because a phrase I often use, Cate, is our energy flows where our focus goes. And you're right. If we are worried about not having completed something or something's still on our mind because we didn't tend to it, then it's absorbing more energy, right?
Also, the things you overthink. Like this is my favorite use of Claude is to give it the thing that I'm overthinking and have it just be done and be like, oh, this is adequate. I didn't need to overthink about it. Like all my social media posts, I'm like, Claude, please help me. And then it's done. It's done. And that's a huge weight off me because that's the kind of thing that, is like a bad use of energy, right? To overthink what I'm posting on social media, something so ephemeral, I just like, I need to post something. I want it to be done quickly. But then I
Yeah.
think, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, these are kind of like seem like slightly trivial topics, but I think on a bigger and more important topic, like often one of the most draining things for managers is doing any kind of performance management. And this is a place where having control of your energy on the small things can really help you with the big thing. Because if you have a hard conversation that you need to have, that conversation does not get easier over time. In fact, it actually gets much worse. And so being able to self-regulate so you can have the way that my collaborator and I, Jean, talk about this is like the feedback with a capital F conversation versus the small f conversation. If you can self-regulate so you're consistently having those small f conversations, then the big F conversations are fewer and further between. But also, if you need to have them, hopefully you do a better job not overthinking it and just coming to it and dealing with it quickly and kindly.
That's fascinating. Go into that a little bit more for us then. What do you mean by the small F conversations and how would they typically unfold?
Yeah, so um, let's say like, I mean, give me a performance management example.
Somebody's underperforming in a task, and whilst we've already drawn their attention to it, they still don't seem to get it.
Okay. So somebody has like a task they have to do regularly and they're not, okay, great. And so like the capital F conversation is like, look, you are still underperforming in this task, and if you do not get it together, then your job is at risk. That is the like capital F conversation. But then the small f conversation is coming back to it and being like, hey, um, I noticed that you're not improving at this task yet. Like, what are you trying? What's working? What's not? And having like to the name of this this program, like a curious conversation when it's not an emergency and when you're still in a path towards fixing it, right? And then, also coming back even before that, like where the conversation even earlier on of like, how do you feel about this task? Do you feel equipped to take it on? Is there anything I can support you with? Like these are the kind of small F conversations that if done consistently and well, I mean, you're never having that big conversation at the end, most likely. But if you do, you're like, I know that I did everything I can to set this person up to succeed. And if they have not taken my advice, that is a choice that they have made, not something I'm responsible for.
I love that. So share with us some sort of practical tips that you've come across that are really good for helping when the pressure's on, Cate. Because we all, I guess most of the tech leaders in the audience today recognize times when unexpectedly the pressure just ramps up.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing is obviously prioritizing. which I'm sure everyone's doing. It's boring. I'm not going to talk about it. The second one, some of you may experience as a personal attack, but stay with me. Some things only need to be done adequately. Is everyone still here? But there's things that don't matter that much. And, I think often in leadership roles, we're there because we have high standards for ourselves. But that doesn't mean that we should apply those high standards to everything consistently. And figuring out what can be adequate and getting it to adequate and off your plate faster can be a huge liberation. And then the third thing is you don't like overwork your way out of overwork. You need to start working smarter, which means the prioritization, which means the adequacy, but it also means like the less you feel that you have time to think, the more you probably need it. And so on that one, there's three things that I have to remind myself consistently of. The first is if I feel like I can't focus, I may need food. The second one is if I feel super overwhelmed, often the best thing to do is take a spin class. And the third one is when I'm in this mindset of I don't have time to take time off, I really need a break. And my last boss gave me this feedback actually, is he was like, oh, often your best work comes after you've taken a longer break. And I never would have thought that for myself. But then I reflected on it. I'm like, oh, I think that's true, because I really ruthlessly prioritize. I really figure out what needs to be done by me and what doesn't. And after I take a longer break and I come back, I always ask people, what did you miss? And what should I continue not doing?
That's a really good question. What should I continue not doing? What would you like me to do more of? What would you like me to do less of? It's often a coaching question I've used myself. Kate, I'm curious, when did you first realize these were things that you perhaps needed to focus on?
I think my first first management job, possibly. Like I had like massive decision fatigue, but then I went from managing a team of 8 in a very small company to managing a team of 20 plus. Could call it a team. It was not really a team, which was which was the problem. It was like a disconnected non-team. And I was managing managers, and that shift was very fast for me. And so I really had to learn quickly how to manage myself. And I do think that this often comes at the managing of managers place, because when you're managing a small team, you can be in a place where everything's okay. But as soon as you have a large team, there's always something that's not okay. It's always on your desk. And how do you still kind of draw a line and leave at the end of the day when that's the case?
And I'm curious to think that at the end of the day, then, how do you debrief your day? What tips can you share with us for helping us to maintain our energy when we're debriefing perhaps a difficult day? Because we often
Yeah,
drive home, and our mind is still at work, and we find ourselves sitting at home, and instead of engaging with our partners, we're kind of still in head mode.
totally. I mean, there's the difference between planning and ruminating, right? And so if you're thinking about something, then the core question there's two big questions for me. Like one is this something I want to give energy to? Because if the answer is no, distracting yourself is good. I like my kind of theory on work-life balance is that we don't get work-life balance by doing less work. We get it by doing more life. So how do you propose something compelling for the evening that will pull you away from the thing that you don't want to think about? But then the second thing is planning, right? And so if what you're doing is having ideas or like realizing with some space, this is what I need to do tomorrow, great, write it down on your to-do list for tomorrow and then move on. I also have like one of the things I've been trying this year is I have a, for me, not very elaborate spreadsheet, but your mileage may vary, where I list everything I'm doing in certain categories and I highlight things that were particularly draining or particularly high value. And then I run it through Claude on normally a weekly basis, but if I'm really overwhelmed, I start doing it on a daily basis so I can kind of get a check on what good looks like. Because if I'm overwhelmed, I can easily get to a place where nothing I'm doing feels like it's good enough. But now I have 3 months of data in this spreadsheet. Like Claude knows what is normally good for me. And so when I'm beating myself up, it will be like, well, actually, you did the same as you normally do. This is an emotional thing, not a real thing. And that has been very helpful to me. But I want to caveat with this of I think this is a good system for people who are inclined to be too hard on themselves. I think people who are inclined not to be hard on enough on themselves, maybe, or not realistic about their own stuff, maybe a chatbot that is inclined to validate you might be like a really bad idea.
Yeah, because we don't want people just blowing smoke, do we? We want real truth. And that is the challenge, I think, because sometimes you're right, we can be self critical. And I always like to say, well, look, it's much better to self assess. What did I find? I did really well today. What did I find challenging, difficult, or tricky? Where can I
Yeah.
get some advice on helping me with that piece? So that's self assessment as opposed to being self critical, where we beat ourselves up for not having achieved our to do list, right?
Yeah, and also, what are you going to learn from not achieving your to-do list? Is it I should be harder on myself tomorrow? Because if you've been harder on yourself 4 days of the week, it's probably not going to work the next, you know? But is it, okay, well, this particular task I made harder on myself than it needed to be. This particular thing was I needed help or I needed more space for it and I didn't create it. So what can I learn from that?
Mm. And I guess, when we talk about the pressure that everyone's experiencing as, business itself evolves, um, when things are complex and when we find the organizational needs shift and the
Yeah.
context sometimes shifts, how is it, how should we as tech leaders then look at defining the role and looking at how we can evolve the role? Because I think
Yeah,
context and operational constraints are sometimes quite challenging to deal with. If we're
totally.
looking to evolve our role, what advice can you share with us for that?
I think the first thing is there's a constant for me in like what any leadership role is, and that is to be a force multiplier on the team you're responsible for. And I don't think that changes even as the context changes. And so that for me is a very anchoring constant of like, okay, every day I come in and I think about how I can make everything around me better. Like I'm a force multiplier. It doesn't matter if today I'm doing it one way and tomorrow I'm doing it another way. But then in terms of evolving the role, like, part of deploying that kind of force multiplier mindset is understanding what the business needs from your team on some kind of time frame, and where your team is today and continually like trying to close the gap between those spaces. And to also be thinking about that gap on a longer time frame, right? Like if you come in, like I told you about when I had to figure this out, this job was very overwhelming. Like that team at the time, like the team that day was not meeting the needs of the organization that day. But and then so that's obviously the first gap to close. But at some point you close that gap and you're like, okay, this team is meeting the needs of the organization today. But I need to start thinking of what are the needs of the organization 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 1 year from now, and what are those gaps going to be so I can start getting ahead of them.
That's a really good point, isn't it? It's about being the strategic leader and looking at, the vision for where we're going. And that needs to be planned, right? We need to allow time to be thinking about strategic decisions, strategic gaps, and how we're going to fill those in. And it takes timing, doesn't it? It's about self-management of your time, as we already spoke about, but also
Yeah,
self-managing your energy so that you can focus on the strategy and not simply be firefighting.
exactly. And I think to your point of like, what do you do differently when times are really challenging? I think you have to bring that time frame in. And I think this is something a lot of us are dealing with right now, which is this industry has been upended in the last 3+ months in a way that I think we knew it was coming, but it's been more than I had expected. And that means, probably you could have been doing a good job and in a position where you had that clarity. My team meets the needs of the organization today. I see exactly how it's going to meet the needs of the business 3, 6, 12 months from now. Everything depends on you. It's okay to come back to today, to not say my job is always to be 12 months out. It's like if the gap is today, the job is today. But the
Mm.
job is also finding out how to push that time frame back over time.
Yeah, and I suppose it's about having that headspace, that managing our
Yes.
energy, allowing time for us to decompress from our day,
Yeah.
and maybe not find ourselves on a Sunday afternoon going straight into work mode. What do I need to do tomorrow, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And strategy, like creating strategy means you have to have the context in which you have to understand the context in which you're operating in. You have to have time to think deeply about it, and you have to understand the direction that you're going in and what's needed. And if you don't have any of those, then you can't do it. And the biggest one, like some of these are a work that we need to do, to get the context, to get the direction. But to do all that work, which I think people normally see as part of their job, but then to deny yourself the space and time to actually think about and do it, like, what a way to waste your own time.
Yeah, I think one of the best definitions I've ever heard of strategy, Kate, I don't know if you'll agree with this. Strategy is the art of planning, which takes time, and then directing your resources at the goals and objectives that will achieve your vision, whatever your vision is.
Yeah.
About having kind of energy focus on each of those specific areas, because the planning needs to happen, delegation needs to happen, and the holding accountable needs to happen.
Yeah, 100%. I like, in as much as I have a religious document, it is the book Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. It's an incredible book. And to your point, it's very much like strategy is about defining and setting the proximate objectives and then executing on them in a way that confirms or denies and generates information for your strategy going forward.
I think which leads us nicely into another subject is how do we actually expand our leadership range? Because that's kind of key area of where we're going in the future, isn't it?
Yeah, I love that question. So for this, I really love Daniel Goleman's work on the 6 leadership styles. I always forget them, so I wrote them down. So, okay, pace setting, authoritative, affiliative, coaching, coercive, and democratic. And most people tend to default to one or two of these, and they often align with our values, right? So people like who are on, like, let's say the softer side of democratic affiliative, like to them, like a coercive style of management or a pace, like it's a moral bad, right? But actually they're all, if you can view them neutrally, they're just different tools for different situations. And the more you're comfortable with a broader range of them, the more effective you can be as a leader, right? So pace setting is, exactly what needs to be done and you're doing it. It's good when you're, when the path is clear and you just need to get something done. Pace setting is a good style. It definitely can wear people out over time. I think it's necessary to be a bit aware of it. Affiliative is bonding, touchy-feely, making people feel good, building like a nice sense of safety, community. Not a strength for me, you can probably gather from the way I talk about it. But if you can see the value of it too, it's you can support other people doing that work even if you don't do it yourself,
Is there a danger with affiliative of being perhaps a little bit people-pleasy?
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. But the same danger with pace setting is you burn people out. They all have the danger side, right?
You micromanage them, right?
Yeah, coaching is probably my default style, and it's really about helping people step into their potential. So it's a great style, but it definitely, I would say that because I default to it, but it's also one that is more effective on a longer term than a shorter term. If somebody just needs to be told something, coaching is not necessarily the most efficient way to deliver that information, right? You can also only coach people that are open to it, right? So yeah, like coaching works when it's great, it's great. When it's not, it's ineffective, right? Coercive is you will do as I say. So this, I think of the coercive as the backbone, like I want to see myself as a pretty easygoing person, and happy to accommodate people or go with the flow. But at some point, if my boundaries have been crossed, you will find my backbone, and that is where the coercive style lives, right? And so this is, for me, this balance of being able to have those coaching conversations, right? But if they don't work, I end up doing the capital F conversation, coercive style, because I'm at the backbone. Like I'm not a pushover, right? And then democratic, this is gathering everyone's opinion, which is great, really good to get everyone's opinion. But the downside of this is sometimes the decision never gets made.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess, I often explain that you'll see a stewardess, being very calm, very collected, very coachy, very affiliative, until there's a crisis, right? If there's a critical situation on the plane, it's very authoritative and coercive. Everybody off, everybody
Exactly.
off. There's no
exactly.
communication, right? It's just directive.
I mean, that's very interesting because, I mean, it's a great example because people tend to think that the job of an airline stewardess is to get them a drink. But actually, like, they're very clear on this. Like, their job in a case of emergency is to get you off the plane. Everything
Keep
else
you
is
alive.
just fluff. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess there are times when we need to be a little bit more authoritative then, right?
Yeah. I think the authoritative style is a good style if you're in a leadership position. If people are looking to you for answers, you should have them. It doesn't mean that you don't care about their opinion, that you don't ask for input. But I'm sure that everyone has encountered those people who they kind of are trying to be liked by their entire team, and their unwillingness to draw on an authoritative stance is makes them less effective. But at the same time, I think authoritative works when you genuinely know what you're doing, right? So you could think of if you say ramped up in a new role, right? Then the democratic, like the whole idea of 90 days of listening is like you do the democratic style for your first 90 days in order to build context and understand what's going on. And then after that, you move to a more authoritative style where you say, okay, I've listened to everybody and here is where we're going. And this is when you start bringing in the coaching style too. Maybe you're like, okay, I've identified the people who are really worth investing in, and now I'm going to spend more energy on that.
Yeah. And I think the clarity of communication is the other leadership skill that sits alongside of this so well. So when we set it against our expectation of standards, achievement of standards, so this is what
Yeah.
I need done, this is the standard I need it done to, this is the time scale I need it done in, and then into coaching, what do you think you need to do first? What help do you need
Yeah.
to do? I love that process because it is holding them accountable for delivering their competencies, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is also like coaching is not just asking questions about everything. Like, I was like, if you have an opinion, you should say it. And then you should be curious about something and ask the question that you're curious about. So let's say somebody didn't deliver something that they said they would, right? That's not a coaching conversation of like, oh, where is this thing? It's like, this did not happen. But then why can be a coaching conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really good because it's identifying the context for each situation because they're all different, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And also, if you come to somebody with a point of view and you start asking questions in service of that, people don't experience that as coaching. They experience it as manipulative. They're like, what is the thing you're not saying to me? But
Mm,
actually, if you can say it, then you can get to this shared source of truth, and all good conversations happen in a shared reality.
yeah. And I think that's one of the most important things is getting people to declare themselves first. I don't know
Hmm.
how you feel about that, but one of the things I often like to ask in a situation is, well, how do you see the situation? And gather all
Hmm.
that information first.
I think that's a great idea. There's a fantastic book by, I think Therese Houston. She's not related to me, so I don't have to remember her first name. But it's called Let's Talk, Making Effective Feedback Your Superpower, and it's really worth reading. But one of the core ideas in it, which I have really internalized, is that you will have a better conversation with somebody if you can ask their experience of it first, right? So let's say it's not a catastrophe yet. I've just noticed something is not maybe going the way I want it to kind of have this conversation of like, how do you think it's going? What's been hard for you? Or, I know this presentation didn't go the way you want it to. What do you want to learn from it? And then when you've had that conversation, you know what information they have, and you know if there's a diff between the information you have and the information they have. And if there's not, you don't need to tell them anything because you've validated. But if there is, then saying, can I give you a piece of advice? Here is one thing I noticed lands way better when somebody feels heard.
Mm, yeah, I like that. And it sits alongside one of Stephen Covey's principles of, asking high quality questions. Seek first to understand and only then to be understood.
Yeah,
And that helps you to gain the context, as you say, from the other person's point of view. But it's being mindful of the right quality of questions to ask, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
And I think the way he used to phrase it was something along the lines of "help me to understand."
I don't know that I agree it's about the question. I do think that it is about having genuine curiosity. And I think if you have genuine curiosity, people will feel that. And so even if your question is not necessarily right, if you can get somebody to understand you're coming from a space of genuine curiosity, you're having a learning conversation. If not, like, like just tell them what it is, and then you can have a feedback conversation. But this third dynamic where it's like it's some kind of feedback conversation masked as a learning conversation that it achieves neither outcome, like just don't bother.
So what would you suggest then as a question to ask?
I mean, any question that comes from like genuine curiosity, I think is a great question to ask. But you have to get curious, you
Hmm.
know? And so kind of looking at a situation and thinking you know, right? Like this is a sign that you're going to end up having the wrong conversation, right? And so kind of stepping back and be like, okay, what don't I know? Right? Because even if you know everything, you don't know the truth of this person's experience. So you can always start there. But there is almost certainly more than that that you don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, there's always a lot in the background, but it's having the courage to go there, isn't it? And sometimes it's about making the time for it. Often when we start a conversation, it can go long beyond where our time constraint was. And that's the
Yeah.
challenge, isn't it?
Well, I think it's also about building an efficient line of communication with between yourself and your directs, right? You don't want every observation to require a 1 hour call. I think you do maybe want to be able to drop in Slack being like, I noticed this. Let me know if I can help, you
Yeah,
know?
the touchline coaching, I think, as you're going through the day, I agree with
Yeah, exactly. But you don't start with a relationship like that. You build a relationship where you're having two-way and conversation and where they know if it's a bigger topic, they can say, okay, I do need to talk to you about that. And then you can start having these kind of small things. But I think, I mean, working with founders, they often start with the like pings and Slack, and you're just like, oh, panic, what does this mean? And I think that's a relationship you can have, but I think you build it, you don't start with it.
So if you were to give somebody a piece of advice, Cate, on how to develop this, and assuming they might be very relatively new to leadership, what would be a great leadership piece of advice to share with them, considering the whole journey we've discussed so far? And I know Steve's going to come in and ask some questions in a moment, not only from the audience, but also from himself. But if you were
Yeah.
to give one person a piece of advice that's relatively new to the leadership journey, what would it be to help them get on this track?
One, it's a totally different topic from everything we've talked about, but can I still?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay. Um, Implicit feedback. So implicit feedback is everywhere. Like if we come back to this idea that your job is to help the team meet the needs of the organization, then everything that suggests that you're not or can't do that, that's implicit feedback for you. And that is the best place to mine for information and what you can do better. Because functionally, everybody thinks that their team is good. Everybody
Mhm.
seems to think they're doing a good job as a manager. I'm like, fine, you're doing a good job. It's much easier to measure progress than state. And that implicit feedback is where you identify the gaps on which you can make progress.
Excellent. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Steve because I know he's sitting there looking at the screen and I know he's got some great questions. So thank you so much for that. Steve, I'm going to invite you to come forward and field, I'm sure, one of your own great questions, first of all, and then to field the questions from the panel today from the audience.
Yeah, I just saw something go by that somebody disagrees with me. I'm not saying about expressing your opinion. I'm saying if you have an opinion, it doesn't serve you to go into a conversation and pretend that that's not true. So either you need to get curious about the things that you don't know, or you may as well just say the thing that is on your mind rather than pretending it's not there.
Excellent. Thank you, Cate. Steve, over to you, buddy.